Have a good break? It's over, isn't it? I'm really bummed too. Oh well. So, the best thing to do is just to leap right in. Here is your next homework assignment. You will find it on the web page. It tests your ability in morphology, the subject that we ended the first half of this class with. And I thought I would just show you the two questions and run through what I'm looking for by way of answer. The answers will be a little bit clearer when we finish talking about morphology, which is the goal of today's lecture. Question 1. I give you a series of words in English. They're kind of longish. I think they're all real words. And I ask you to parse these words, to show me what morphemes they are made up of. They're made up of morphemes that we've learned in this class. And to give me a representation of these words that uses that tree notation that indicates which two morphemes have come together and which morpheme has been added to the result of those first two, and so on. We'll see some of these again in today's lecture. It's a way we saw of representing words last week, the week before last. Okay, so an answer to this first question is, for each of these words, a parse. Break them up into morphemes. Show me how those morphemes go together. Second question, I teach you a new morpheme, and I want you to tell me some things about it. The morpheme is this prefix, mis. And I give you here some lists of words that use this prefix mis, like misanalyze or misread, and so on. Some of these are no good, like mishappy, taint grammatical. Okay? And I want you to tell me, what does the rule that puts mis together with other morphemes look like? Okay? So that's step 1. That's the first answer to this question that I want. What's the rule for mis? What can mis go on? What does it make? Okay. And the second question asks you to deduce whether this affix, this prefix mis, belongs to the derivational class or the inflectional class. You'll remember we learned about that, the 6 of you that came anyway on the Friday before break, learned about what that distinction is. And you have various criteria, various ways of gauging which group morphemes belong to. In this case, so the second answer I want is, oh, mis is derivational, or it's inflectional. And here's why I think so. Okay? And in this particular case, what I'll tell you is, it's useful to look at this word, misthrowable, which uses mis, and to consider how it was made. That will give you an important clue to making this decision about whether mis is derivational or inflectional. Okay? 2 questions, that's it. The first, a series of trees showing me how the words were built. The second, 2 answers, a rule that tells me how mis works, and then it's derivational, or it's inflectional, and here's why. Any questions about this? Really? Good. So it's due a week from today. All right. Well, I'll start by just reminding you, since it's been so long since we've seen each other. My name's Kyle. Reminding you a little bit about what we learned in the last lecture. So one thing we learned is by looking at compounds, there seems to be a regularity concerning the part of speech that a word built from morphemes is. And that regularity is the part of speech of the morpheme of, say, the 2 morphemes that go together into making a word. The part of speech of the entire word is always the same as the part of speech of the morpheme on the right-hand side. Okay? We call the morpheme whose part of speech derives the part of speech of the word being made a head. And so one way of expressing this regularity is the head of a word is the morpheme on the right-hand side. It has the same part of speech categorization as the morpheme does on the right. If this is a noun, this is a noun. If this is an adjective, this will be an adjective, and so on. And we then looked and saw that there's a regularity in the words made not from free morphemes like compounds, but words made with bound morphemes that seems to suggest the same rule applies here too. In all of the cases that involve prefixes, the part of speech of the word being built is exactly the same as the part of speech of the morpheme on the right-hand side, the word to which the prefix attaches. So you put re on a verb and the result is a verb. You put on an adjective and the result is an adjective. Okay? Sir?
So for that first example, re plus verb, that verb is the head?
Yes, this is the head of this. This is the head of this. Okay? When we look at suffixes, we see a slightly messy picture. When we look at suffixes, so first, with respect to prefixes, there's a law. The part of speech is always the same as the part of speech of the morpheme on the right-hand side. That would follow if the words parts of speech are always derived from the morpheme on the right-hand side. When we look at suffixes, we see sometimes the part of speech of the word being built differs from the part of speech of the free morpheme that is inside them. Readable or doable, for instance, is an adjective, and that's something different than read or do, a verb. And sometimes they match. So, what's this? Batter. What is this? Batter, shoes, cold, called. Sometimes the part of speech of the word being built is the same as the part of speech of the morpheme on the, not right-hand side, but left-hand side. That violates this generalization. It was this puzzle that we were looking at last time. These cases could be explained, would fit our generalization, if these bound morphemes also belong to parts of speeches. So if able, for instance, is an adjective, then the fact that readable or doable is an adjective would follow from able being an adjective. In these cases, it's a bound morpheme. That's the head. Okay? And that's what we adopted, that view. So doable would be parsed. Here's those trees I was talking about before. Doable is made from these two morphemes. Able, our speculation is an adjective. And because it's an adjective, so is the word that it heads. Is a noun. And for that reason, so is the word here, builder, that it heads. Okay? But what about these cases? So what about the cases where the part of speech of the word being built looks like it's the same as not the morpheme on the right, the suffix here, but the morpheme on the left, the free morpheme? And here what I tried to convince you is that in all of these cases, what we were looking at was a different kind of morpheme, an inflectional morpheme. Inflectional morphemes differ from derivational morphemes in a variety of ways. One of those is that inflectional morphemes, there is a way of expressing that inflectional morpheme for every member of the class of things to which those morphemes attach. For instance, every verb has a past tense form. It's a bit complicated, as I taught you last time. It sometimes uses the suffix da, and sometimes there's a special word to express the past tense. But no matter which means is used, every verb has a past tense form. Every verb does not have an adjective built from able associated with it, however. Able is a derivational suffix. The past tense morpheme is an inflectional one. And that's one of the ways in which these two kinds of affixes differ. And so it goes with all three of those suffixes that do not seem to have the effect of changing the category of the word that they attach to. Not just the past tense suffix, but also the plural suffix that you discovered and worked on in your homework assignment. For every noun, there is a plural form. Za, or the specialized words to express plural, like children or sheep. These are inflectional affixes. And similarly, the suffix that goes on adjectives to express the comparative form, longer, bigger, and so on, those too are inflectional affixes. Every adjective has a comparative form, though it doesn't always involve the suffix that we initially discovered as the comparative morpheme. Sometimes there are specialized words, and sometimes there's an entirely free morpheme used, the word more, to form these comparatives. Okay? Difference one then, derivational affixes do not attach to every word in the class of words that they can attach to. Able attaches to some verbs, but not all of them. Whereas, by contrast, inflectional affixes, the categories of words that inflectional affixes attach to are capable of... Yeah. Do I have to... Oh dear, it's all on camera even. For an inflectional morpheme, every word in the word class that can bear that morpheme can bear that morpheme. There is a comparative form for every adjective. There is a plural form for every noun. Okay? So that's one difference we saw in these two classes of morphemes. And another difference we saw is that inflectional affixes have an effect not just on how the word that they're in is spoken, but also an effect on how words that are found elsewhere in the sentence in which that word is found are spoken. And so, for instance, shoe, the singular, allows a finite verb that follows to be pronounced one way, is, in this case. But the plural form of shoe, shoes, for instance, changes how that finite verb is pronounced. Are, for instance. The shoe is, the shoes are. And we saw the same thing for the comparative. Inflectional morphology somehow is morphology that has an effect on a wider range than derivational morphology does. It affects not just how the words it's in are pronounced, but how neighboring words are as well. That's another thing that distinguishes these two. Okay? Two ways in which derivational and inflectional affixes differ. And it turns out, finally, that so far as we know, inflectional affixes never change the categories of words. If you can tell that a morpheme, a suffix, is an inflectional affix, you will know that the word class it attaches to will be the word class of the word formed by bringing these two together. The plural suffix goes on nouns, and the result are nouns. The past tense suffix goes on verbs, and the result are verbs. That is always true of inflectional affixes. So one way of thinking about how to derive that fact, how to express that fact about how inflectional affixes differ from derivational ones, their inability to change or determine the category of the word that's being built, is to imagine that inflectional affixes, unlike derivational affixes, do not ever belong to parts of speech. Whereas able could be an adjective, and that's why doable is an adjective. The plural za, or the past tense da, isn't anything at all. It's not a verb, it's not a noun, it's not an adjective. It has no part of speech status. Okay. And now think about this law that I told you about. So the law that determines the part of speech of some word goes like this. Look at the morphemes in the word. Find the leftmost one that has a part of speech attribute, that belongs to a part of speech. That one will be the part of speech of the word being built. Okay? Did I say leftmost? Yeah. Is that right? Yes. Rightmost is what I should have said. Is that right? Let me try again. I'll get up on a higher step. Yeah. I need to practice lecturing every week or I forget how to do it. Actually, I need to practice thinking every week or I forget how to do it. Yeah, so the law goes like this. It says, look at the morphemes in a word, find the part of speech of the rightmost one. That will be the part of speech that the word you're building has. All the words we've seen have just two morphemes in them. So if both of those morphemes belong to a part of speech, then the rightmost one will determine the part of speech. The one on the right will determine the part of speech of the word that's being built. So spellable is an adjective because, our little theory tells us, able is an adjective. If inflectional affixes don't belong to parts of speech, they are neither nouns nor adjectives nor verbs, then the rightmost word, morpheme inside this word spelled, will be the left morpheme. It's the only morpheme that has a part of speech. And so it is the rightmost by default. And for that reason, the part of speech of the resulting word will be a verb too. Is it clear? Okay, sir.
So in the case with spell and duh, is duh still the head of the...
No. In this case, this will be. So the head is defined as the word whose part of speech the larger word takes. Okay. All right. Are we? Sir.
So the head is of the word, it's not a morpheme?
It's a morpheme. Did I say word a moment again? A moment again? A moment ago?
Can it be either?
It can be either. So remember, words are all morphemes. Every word is a... Is that right? Yeah? Am I saying the right thing? They tell me that's true. Every word is a morpheme. Some morphemes aren't words. So, yeah. A word is merely a morpheme that can stand alone. Okay, good. So, inflectional, derivational affixes. Here are some differences between them. I'll teach you one more difference between them in a moment. Okay. So what we've learned so far is that we have in our heads little rules that tell us how to construct new words from the morphemes that we've memorized when we learned English. And these rules say things like, re can go on verbs. And we know what the result is because of this procedure I just went through. We know that the result is a verb because of these two, the right-handmost that has a part of speech status is the verb. That's in our head. And we're able to apply these morphemes, combine these morphemes in rather complicated ways. So it's possible, for instance, to build up words that have more than just two morphemes in them by strategically creating from two morphemes a word to which another morpheme can attach. Yeah. That, for instance, is what's happening here in this word, redoable. This word is made from this verb, redo, plus the suffix able. This suffix, we've decided, belongs to the part of speech adjective, and so the resulting word is an adjective. This verb, redo, though, is built from two morphemes too. In this case, by the prefix re, whose part of speech we don't know. The only way we'll know the part of speech of bound morphemes is if they happen to show up on the right-hand side, because then we'll be able to see what part of speech they are by virtue of the part of speech of the word they make. Prefixes never do that, so though they have a part of speech, we don't know what it is. Re attaches to this verb do to make redo. This is a verb because this, the right-hand morpheme, is a verb. Clear? Okay. So on the assignment that I give you, that first question gives you a series of words that have more than two morphemes being brought together. And these are the sorts of things I'm looking for by way of answer. I want you to show me with these little trees, these little graphs, which two morphemes went together first, which morphemes attached later, what order they are, and what parts of speech the words being built belong to. Okay, sir?
I think no, it's not re plus doable.
Why don't I think it's re plus doable? Good question. Well, let's see. So I could make doable. That's a possible adjective. Able goes on verbs. The result is an adjective. Doesn't go on every verb, but it does go on do. We can see that by, well, just putting able on do and asking ourselves, is doable good? This is an adjective. Doable is an adjective. Re. What part of speech does re go on? Verbs. So this is not possible. Re can't attach to the result of putting do and able together, because putting do and able together makes something that re does not attach to, an adjective. Okay? So that's part of the trick of knowing, when you have more than two morphemes, in what order they attach. Okay? So here's what I suggest you do. When presented with words that have more than two morphemes in them, and you're tasked with figuring out how they got constructed, what I suggest you do is find the free morpheme to which the bound morphemes have attached. In this instance, that's the verb do. Then you'll have either prefixes or suffixes on either side of this thing, and you should ask, well, which did it attach to first? Okay. Make a decision. It can be random. Put those two together. Ask yourself, is the result a possible word of English? If it is, so far so good. Label it. In this case, it would be a verb or an adjective. And then attach the other suffix or prefix, if you can. Yeah. Just do that over and over again, stopping at every point where you've put two affixes, two morphemes together, and ask yourself, is what I've made up to now something that sounds like a possible English word? Okay? If you get through that process, you will have constructed the right representation for that word. Okay? Are we okay so far? Okay. So the last thing I want to teach you today about morphology is the last thing that distinguishes inflectional from derivational affixes. And this is a curious thing. So we can build words with more than two affixes where one of those affixes is from the derivational class and the other from the inflectional class. That's what we're seeing here, for instance. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the verb bake, I'm adding the suffix -er. This suffix is a noun, we know, because the resulting word, the word it heads, is a noun. Baker is a head, is a noun, is a word, is the thing I'm pointing at. Okay, baker. And then we can take this noun and add to it the plural suffix, za. This doesn't belong to a part of speech, so as a result of these two, the rightmost one with a part of speech label is baker, and this is a noun as a result. Bakers. Okay. See how I got there? Notice I added the derivational suffix before the inflectional suffix. If we try to build words that attach those affixes in the other order, that is, putting the inflectional affix on before a derivational affix, the results are always bad. They never work. In English, in every language, not possible. So, for instance, as an illustration of this, suppose I start with the verb bake. I put on a past tense morpheme. Okay? Da turns into ta for the reasons that we saw a couple of weeks ago, to make the past tense verb baked. I can't then take this verb, baked, and add onto it. I can add onto bake, but not onto its past tense form. Baked not a word. Clear? What happened here? I added the inflectional suffix, the past tense morpheme ta, before I added the derivational morpheme that makes nouns out of verbs. So here's the law. If a word has both a derivational and an inflectional affix in it, the derivationals must add, all of them, before any inflectional affix is added on. They cannot go in the other order. Okay? Right. A law of morphology. Is this fine? Okay, so we're done with morphology. That's it. No more. What have we done? We learned about our mouths. We learned how our mouths make phones. We learned how phones arrange themselves into morphemes and how those phones change slightly or are arranged slightly by phonological rules. We have now looked at how morphemes combine up. I suppose I should hide all my. Yeah, here we go. To make words. And our next department is looking at how words, those things built from morphemes, morphemes built from phones, how those words are arranged into sentences. And this branch of linguistics is called syntax. This, ladies and gentlemen, is surely the most sophisticated, well-studied, best in every sense branch of linguistics, syntax. I will show you a few things about that. And we'll start by looking, as we have in all of these examples, all these cases, by looking at English. Okay? So the first thing is we need to make clear what our goals are, what needs to be described. And one thing that needs to be described is the fact that certain arrangements of words, so certain ways of stringing words together, make English sentences, and others just make a list of words, not a sentence. So, for instance, the dog chased the cat is a way in which you can arrange these words, the, chase, dog, cat, that makes a sentence. But this isn't a way of arranging those words. Dog, cat, the, chase, the. It's just a list of words, damn it. It's not a sentence. Okay? So as a sentence, it's no good. That's what that star at the beginning means. So we need to have some way of just characterizing, what it is that allows you as English speakers to know that this is a sentence and this tain't. That's one thing. And the other thing we need to know is the fact that which arrangements that are possible you use by itself conveys a meaning that the sentence is carrying. And so, for instance, if I take the same words that are arranged here and arrange them this way, the cat chased the dog, it means something different, right? In this case, we've got Fluffy and Fido, and in this case, we've got Tiger and Spot. Okay? So, two goals. How to characterize the arrangements of words that are sentences in English or some other language and which aren't. And then somehow to figure out how do those arrangements themselves mean something, convey meaning. Those are our goals. And we'll start with the first of those. And the first thing I want to say about this is, to a very large extent, our ability to know, to recognize that this arrangement of particular words is a sentence or not, depends not actually on the particular words, but on the parts of speech that those words belong to. Okay? So it isn't, for instance, that somehow in our heads we know, oh, the word the can come before the word dog, can come before the word chased, can come before, and so on. But instead what we have in our heads really is something like, oh, any word that's a determiner, or an article, that's what the is, can come before any word that is a noun, that's what dog is, can come before any word that is a verb, that's what chased is, and so on. Okay? And I can show this to you by simply asking you, is this a sentence in English? Of course, you have to remember what I taught you in this class. So, what did I teach you? What does turl mean? Right? Okay. And do you remember turl? What does turl mean? Were you nodding yes? Or were you shaking your head no?
I understand.
You understand. And you know what it means?
Yes.
Okay, good. I don't have to grab your hair. And what is a burgostand? Yeah, so... Right? That's what I'm saying here. Yeah. You know that's a sentence of English if you happen to have remembered turl and burgostand from this class. Why? Well, not because you've ever seen this sentence before. You didn't learn anything about turl or burgostand beyond that turl is a verb. You have such soft hair. And burgostand is a noun. Right? That's enough for you to know that this is a legitimate arrangement of words into a sentence. And so we start with that guess. What you have in your head somehow is something that says, oh, if you're of this part of speech, then you can come before something of this part of speech, and so on. Okay? All right. So let's just now start looking at English sentences and record what we discover about them. And what we'll record looking at particular English sentences is a guess about what arrangements of parts of speech are possible. All right. I'm going to just assume you know what parts of speech are. That you learned that in, I don't know, 3rd grade or... Did you guys learn parts of speech? Sometimes I'll call these categories. And you know, just so we're on the same page, adjective refers to a set of words that includes these. And I'll abbreviate adjectives with an uppercase A. Noun, okay, you know, the guy with the chainsaw. And I'll abbreviate noun with an uppercase N. Verb, here's some examples. I'll abbreviate that with an uppercase V. I almost said F. Prepositions are these things. I'll abbreviate that with a P. And then there's words like these, the, that, some, this, every, many, much, and so on. I'll call these determiners, and I'll abbreviate that with a D. Sometimes they're called articles. Or, did you learn another word for this part of speech? I'll call them determiners. Sir?
Aren't some, this, every adjectives?
Some, this, and every. These aren't adjectives. And let's see, how can I show you this? A fact about adjectives is that they can come before other adjectives. Okay? So I can say, the big bad professor, right? Or, you know, the smart hunky professor, or, you know, anything like that is fine, right? And a fact about determiners is that they cannot be preceded by adjectives. They always come before every adjective. So, you know, we have like the, smart, good-looking, fast, cute, nice, professor. But we don't have cute the professor. Okay? In this regard, some behaves not like an adjective, but like a determiner. So we have, you know, some nice students, but not nice some students. Okay, so that's why I've decided to call them determiners, for that reason. Their function somehow is very similar to adjectives, but where they can stand is different. Okay, so we'll start looking at a few sentences. Here's the first one. Syntax rocks. They held me back in graduate school for a couple of years because of syntax, so I've tried to revise my attitude towards this field. Syntax is really, really cool. Right? And what we're seeing here is, well, syntax is a noun, rocks, well, I guess it's a verb, I suppose. Yeah? So what we're seeing here is that a grammatical arrangement of parts of speech, that is, something that makes a sentence, is noun followed by verb. Now, it turns out that in the place of the noun can be a rather long list of strings of words. Okay, so let me show you a few of these. Oh, yeah, and here's a way of describing that. So a sentence, that's what this represents, can be a noun followed by a verb. Okay, so this is a rule that describes what we're seeing illustrated by this one sentence. Okay? These are called phrase structure rules, and our first job in this part of the class is to learn the correct phrase structure rules for English. It'll take us a couple days. And here's a way of representing, using these little graphs, how these two words arrange themselves, well, as according to this rule. So this and this mean the same thing, except here we're spelling out which particular noun and which particular verb are chosen. So a sentence can be a noun followed by a verb. These two together make a sentence, and in this instance, the noun is syntax, the verb is rocks. All right. I can take the noun part of this sentence and replace it with this string, that kid, and I'll still get a grammatical sentence. That kid is a determiner, that's what that is, followed by a noun. Or I can take that first slot in a sentence and stick there not a noun or a determiner noun sequence, but a determiner, that's what is, adjective, that's what big is, noun sequence. A big kid rocks, also grammatical. Or I can take that first slot and I can put in there and still get a grammatical arrangement of words, an English sentence, a determiner, that's what some is, a noun kid, a preposition, that's what in is, and another noun class. Some kid in class rocks. Okay. Another instance of the same sequence, though here I've got determiner, that's what every is, noun, preposition, another determiner, another noun, every kid on the block rocks. And I can keep doing this. So what I'm trying to show you here is that if you think of a sentence as having two parts, a noun and a verb, in the noun spot can be a whole long list of other things. You can hold the verb you've chosen constant, and the result will always be another well-formed English collection of words. And now, here's a way of describing that. We'll say that a sentence, ends with a verb, but it starts now with anything that belongs to this class of strings. All of these have a noun in them, so syntax is just a noun. That kid is a noun preceded by something. A big kid is a noun preceded by two things. Some kid in class is a noun preceded by one thing and followed by two. All of these strings have a noun in them. And so what we're going to call this collection of strings that can always start a sentence, a phrase, a noun phrase, reflecting the fact that each of these strings has a noun in them. And here's a way of doing that with these rules. So we'll say a sentence can start with a noun phrase. And a noun phrase, what can it look like? Well, it's a noun preceded optionally by an adjective. That's what these parentheses mean. And these two things can be preceded optionally by a determiner. And following the noun, you can get a preposition followed by another noun phrase coming after the noun. Yeah. So like here we've got determiner adjective noun. Here we've got determiner noun P, determiner noun, P, and then another one of these that's a determiner and a noun. Do you see how this works? So here would be a way, say, of parsing, of showing the breakdown, the position for each word for a sentence like this, given that rule. So this sentence, a big kid rocks, well, it still ends with a verb, but the thing that comes first is one of these noun phrases, and in this particular instance, the noun phrase is something that belongs to the determiner, it's the, something that belongs to the adjective, it's big, something that belongs to the noun class, that's kid. Okay. So, sentences start with noun-like things and end with verbs. Actually, they end with verb-like things. Because in the place of the verb in a sentence, I can plug in another long list of strings of words. All of them will start with the verb, rocks, stands, or scares in these examples. And then there can be other words following. So after stands is just a preposition. After stands here, stands on the stool, is a preposition followed by, well, determiner noun. This is a noun phrase. And in this case, we've got a verb followed by a determiner noun. This is a noun phrase. Some other examples. And so we should change our rules to reflect this wider class of possibilities. A sentence is, again, made up of two things. The first is, well, a noun phrase, so either a noun or a noun with other accompanying material. And the second of which is now a verb phrase. So a verb or a verb with accompanying material. And this rule describes what that accompanying material can be. Verb phrases are always strings of words that start with verbs and continue in this way. After the verb, you can have optionally one of these guys, a noun phrase. And that's what we're seeing here in scares the kid, or scares Samantha, or scares the big kid. And then following this, if it's present, you can have a preposition, or you can have a preposition and a noun phrase together. And that's what we're seeing in these two cases. Okay. Are you fine? So here's a way of representing one of those sentences, again using these graphs, these trees, that assign to every word in a sentence a particular position. So here, syntax scares the kid. It's kind of silly sentence, because what would be scary about syntax? This is a sentence whose noun phrase has just the noun syntax in it. And the second part of this sentence, this verb phrase, starts with this verb, and following this verb, scares, is, well, a noun phrase. This noun phrase has two things in it, unlike that, the first of which is a determiner, the, and the second of which is this noun, kid. These will all be on lecture notes posted on the website, along with these slides. And the last thing I want to show you today is, oh yes?
Just about the last slide. For the, where I noticed that you split it up, the verb phrase, you split it up further into a verb and a noun phrase.
Yeah.
Do you need to do that? Like, is that essential?
Essential.
Okay.
Yeah. Here, here's how this part of the class is going to go. So I'm going to show you these sentences, and I'm going to kind of make decisions for you about how these rules should be written. Okay? And my decisions will sometimes be mistakes. And then I will show you the mistakes and correct them, and eventually we will converge on something that I think is mistake-free. I have to do that because these rules are kind of complicated, and if I just gave them to you all at once, you'd die. Sometimes I've had students simply explode in this class. It's a mess, and I've been asked never to do that again. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. So these actually are completely wrong. But they're on the path to rightness. All right? So that's one thing I have to tell you about what I'm doing to you right now. The other thing I have to tell you is that I will never really stop lying to you. So I won't, you should stop and ask me, like right now you did. Do we have to do it that way? The answer will always be yes, because why? I am God. That's why. Okay? But is it right? You should make me try and tell you whether it's right or wrong. Okay? So when you ask yourself, why are we doing it that way rather than some other way? Don't ask yourself, ask me. And I will tell you, no, you have to do what I do, which, just because I've got the tie, well, and the suspenders. But we should talk about, is it more than just me being an asshole? What's the truth? Yeah, it's sort of relevant that we do that. Okay? Well, all right, we'll start with this on Friday.